Welcome to our discussion, folks. Today we're diving into some pretty intense revelations about war preparations in Europe, as laid out by a former German politician, Dr. Petra Erler.
Right, that's a heavy topic. What exactly are we dealing with here?
So, Dr. Erler, who has a unique background as an ex-East German politician and state secretary during reunification, sheds light on how Europe is, well, gearing up militarily.
Got
Her
it.
story blends her deep political roots with a sharp critique of the current situation.
That's fascinating. How does she frame these preparations?
It's like she argues that the Western narrative often conveniently shifts blame onto Ukraine for the crisis, while at the same time, these so called insane war preparations are happening behind the scenes in Europe.
Yep,
She calls
exactly.
out what she sees as political criminals preventing a truthful debate.
Wow, so she's challenging the mainstream narratives about war and conflict.
Yes, definitely. And in her detailed commentary, she points to actions by Western powers that she insists are designed to escalate tension
Interesting.
instead of promoting detente. It's a stance that puts her at odds with many mainstream opinions.
Does she offer any insights into potential consequences or what might come next?
Absolutely. She forewarns that these military preparations, essentially hidden under the guise of protecting democracies, could very well lead to further destabilization. It's like a powder keg just waiting for a spark.
Yeah, I can imagine.
The underlying threat, according to her, is a setup for an all-out war right in Europe.
And I guess her credentials lend significant weight to these views, don't they?
Exactly. She isn't just any commentator. Having been deeply involved in the reunification process and even serving in a high-level government position, she presents herself as someone who truly understands both the political and historical undercurrents at play here.
That adds a lot. There's also that strong literary angle, right? Her book, The Long Road to War, Russia, Ukraine, and the West, Escalation Instead of Detente, seems designed to provide a broader context.
Exactly, and it's not just an academic exercise. The title itself tells you that she sees history and current events intertwined. It's almost like she's warning that unresolved issues and past missteps are converging into the current crisis.
Right on point. Now, isn't it interesting how she frames the idea of Western guilt in the Ukrainian catastrophe? That seems to be a recurring theme.
Absolutely. She argues that there's a sort of denial about Western responsibility. You see, her perspective challenges the narrative that solely places blame on Ukraine, and instead she blames political elites within the West for intentionally escalating tensions.
Yeah. But, one could argue, aren't there other forces at play? Aren't these sorts of political fault lines sometimes oversimplified?
That's a fair challenge. Some might say her view is a bit conspiratorial, suggesting that the preparation for war is less about imminent external threats and more about a strategic game in the corridors of power.
Yep,
It's
I
a
see that.
potent perspective, but needs careful scrutiny.
Right, there's always a risk with such views that they might lead to further polarization.
True, but her argument is built on detailed historical insights. She places a lot of emphasis on gestures and decisions made by political figures after the Cold War. That background gives her critique a certain depth.
That's compelling. And what about her discussion on current military alliances? Does she specifically mention NATO?
Yes, indeed. She touches on how NATO's role, particularly in the context of Ukraine, might be complicit in a broader strategic plan that ends up fueling more conflict rather than
Right,
diffusing
that's a bold
it.
statement. That really shifts the focus from traditional threat narratives to a more introspective look at power structures. How do you think her analysis impacts public understanding?
Well, it really encourages listeners to question the official narratives. It's like, think of it as an alternative lens, one that forces us to reconsider who's really responsible when diplomatic crises escalate.
Definitely. And I assume that has resonated with a sizable audience, given the view counts and engagement?
Yeah, it's got millions watching, and while not everyone agrees, the fact that it has such traction means that her perspective, whether one agrees with it or not, is stirring serious conversation.
Yep, that's true. It's intriguing how these digital platforms can amplify such challenging narratives. They really contribute to a broader debate in society.
Exactly, and that's the power of these platforms. They allow voices that might otherwise be silenced to bring a completely different take on a very contentious subject.
That's the crux of it. Now, I wonder, could such narratives also contribute to, instability or even public desensitization?
That's a valid concern. Some critics might argue that the more you expose these risk laden theories, the more you risk normalizing extreme views.
That's a fair point.
However, in her case, it seems her aim is to alert the public, not incite panic.
But by exposing these details, isn't there a chance of inciting further distrust in established institutions?
There is that risk, absolutely. It's a fine line. Dr. Erler certainly challenges the status quo, and while her credentials do lend her arguments credibility, her narrative also demands that the audience approach the information critically.
Yep, exactly. And there's that inherent tension between accountability and sensationalism. It sounds like the content walks right on that edge.
Precisely. The whole presentation is layered with historical context, personal experience, and a probing examination of strategic decisions over decades. It's like she's saying, look, these decisions weren't made in a vacuum.
That's sharp. And it's definitely not your everyday commentary. It challenges listeners to cross-examine what they think they know about, say, NATO or the West's role in global diplomacy.
Absolutely. To me, it's like peeling back the layers of an onion. Each layer reveals another dimension of political strategy and even conflicting motivations behind global security policies.
Very much so. So, in drawing it all together, what's your final take on Dr. Erler's revelations?
I'd say her revelations are provocative. They push the audience to reevaluate long-held assumptions about war and peace. While some might see her critique as overly alarmist, there's no denying that her insights provide a counterbalance to the mainstream narrative.
Right, that's a neat wrap-up. And by questioning established narratives, she not only fuels debate, but also emphasizes the importance of critical thinking when it comes to national security and international diplomacy.
Exactly. It's like a wake-up call, a reminder that behind every headline, there's a complex web of motivations, historical baggage, and, well, power plays.
Indeed. Well, folks, this conversation certainly sheds new light on an overdue discussion about war preparations and accountability in European politics.